It was the kind of night that felt like time had paused. The hospital was calm, wrapped in a blanket of quiet. Only the soft hum of machines and the distant beeping of monitors filled the air. Dim emergency lights cast a gentle, ghostly glow across the clean white walls, creating long shadows that stretched down the empty halls. The night shift was in full swing. Nurses walked carefully. Doctors whispered updates to one another, and every now and then, the sound of footsteps echoed softly through the corridors like a gentle drumbeat. Oh no. It seemed like just another uneventful night. But something was about to change. At the main entrance, the automatic glass doors slid open with a soft hiss. No one gave it much thought at first. Was late, and they assumed it was another patient, maybe someone injured or in need of help. But what stepped through the doors made everyone stop in their tracks. It wasn't a person. It was a dog. A large German shepherd stood in the doorway, its fur tangled and coated with dry mud. The dog's eyes were deep and tired, but held a quiet strength, as if it had traveled a long way with purpose. This was Max, a retired police dog who had once served bravely on the force. Max didn't bark or panic. He didn't look lost or frightened. He stood tall, though clearly exhausted, and held something carefully in his mouth. Everyone stared. In his strong jaws was a small bundle wrapped in what looked like an old worn-out cloth. The nurses exchanged wide-eyed glances. One of them took a hesitant step forward, then another. Curiosity and concern outweighed fear. She knelt down and slowly reached for the bundle. Max let it go gently, never once showing aggression. When she unwrapped the cloth, the entire room seemed to stop breathing. Inside was a baby dot, tiny, fragile, barely moving. Its skin was pale, and its chest rose and fell with labored breaths. For a moment, no one moved. No one even blinked. The nurse's hand flew to her mouth as she gasped, "Oh my God, it's a baby!" The silence shattered. In an instant, the emergency room burst into action. Nurses and doctors snapped into their roles, running toward the baby, calling out instructions, grabbing equipment. Their shoes pounded the floors as they rushed through the halls, pulling monitors, oxygen supplies, and 4 kits. The quiet night was now filled with urgency and the fight for a tiny life. No way. One nurse whispered as she connected the baby to a monitor. "A dog just brought us a newborn." Max stood still near the door, calm and alert. He didn't bark, whine, or move closer. He just watched, eyes focused entirely on the child, as if he understood everything happening. His gaze wasn't wild or scared. It was steady, patient, almost human. The baby was in bad shape. One nurse checked his heartbeat while another gently felt his cold skin. "He's ice cold," she said softly. "Weak pulse." "He's barely breathing." "He's dehydrated and malnourished," said the lead doctor, his voice firm but worried. "Get an IV started. We need to stabilize his breathing now." A slow, faint beep came from the heart monitor. It was the sound of a struggle, a fragile heartbeat trying to hold on. A nurse gently slipped a mask over the baby's face, connecting it to an oxygen tank, adjusting the flow with shaky fingers. The room was tense, everyone moving quickly, but with care. Each action measured and critical as the team focused on saving the infant. One nurse couldn't help but glance over at Max. He hadn't moved an inch. His eyes never left the child. "How did he know to come here?" she whispered, not expecting an answer. No one could explain it. Somehow, Max, a retired police dog, alone and worn out, had carried this baby to the one place where someone could help. He hadn't hesitated. He hadn't wasted a second. It was as if he knew this was his mission. The doctors worked nonstop. One nurse carefully adjusted the oxygen again, while another wiped dirt from the baby's tiny hands. Slowly, the monitor's beeping grew steadier. "He's still weak, but his vitals are improving." Someone reported quietly. Relief washed through the room like a soft wave. It wasn't over. Not even close. The baby was still in critical condition. But thanks to Max, He now had a real chance. And Max, he just sat by the door, watching, waiting. As if he wasn't ready to leave until he knew the baby would live. Max, though clearly exhausted, never took his eyes off the baby. The room fell into a brief, profound silence as the medical staff fully grasped the extraordinary fate that had just unfolded. News of the bizarre incident spread quickly throughout the hospital within minutes. Police received a call requesting THR support. Officer Daniels, the lead investigator, arrived at the scene with his team. As they entered the emergency room, Ursus recounted the surreal story. Their faces still filled with shock. Where have no idea where the dog came from, the head nurse explained, her voice trembling slightly. He brought the baby and placed him on the floor and just stood there. That's all we know, Officer Daniels narrowed, his eyes taking in the sight of Max near. Then Trent's dog carried a baby to the hospital. That's hard to believe, he muttered, though his expression softened as he observed Max's calm yet watchful demeanor. Has anyone tried scanning for H.F. Daniels? Asked a young officer, stepped forward with a scanner and cautiously approached Max. However, as soon as he got too close, Max backed away, his posture tense but not aggressive. His eyes remained sharp and alert, as if warning them not to come any nearer. This dog's been trained, the young officer marked. He might be a retired canine. Daniels nodded and took a step closer, his movements slow and unthreatening. There, buddy, he said softly. Max studied him for a moment before allowing the officer to clip a leash onto his collar. Let's see where he came from, Daniels instructed, signaling his team to follow. Max began to walk, his steps deliberate and steady, as though he knew exactly where he was going. The officers followed closely, the flashing lights from their patrol cars casting long shadows on the pavement. They moved through the city streets, insolence tension growing with each passing block. Where's he taking us? One officer murmured under his breath. Finally, Ma stopped in front of an old dilapidated house in a deserted part off town. The front door was ajar, as if Somione had left in a hurry. Daniels frowned. This is it, he said quietly. The officers exchanged vague glances before cautiously approaching the entrance. The smell of mold, stale air, and rotting food hit them as they stepped inside. Max led them through a cluttered living room and toward a small door at the back of the house. Stay sharp, Daniels, ordered Eddie's voice, low and tense. When they opened a door, they found a small, dimly lit room. In one corner stood an old, dusty crib. Around it were scattered signs: offers and occupancy, an empty dog food bowl, a tattered blanket, and a few children's items strewn across the floor. Max slowly approached the crib and sniffed the spot where the baby had once been. The baby was here, an officer whispered, his face hardening as he took in the Sinig's house. Did Max finally collapsed beside a death crib, his body going limp as though was allowing himself to rest. For the first time, his mission was complete. The officers continued their search through the abandoned house, their flashlight beams cutting through layers of dust in every corner. The wooden floor groaned under their boots with each cautious step. Everything inside the house spoke of long-term neglect. Chairs, wherever turned, cabinets stood empty, and the dining table was littered with crumpled papers. It looks like whoever lived here left in a hurry, one officer remarked, flipping through the scattered documents. In the table, meanwhile, another officer explored the kitchen. The sink was full of dirty dishes and a faint odor. Afriting food lingered in the air. On the countertop, a crumpled envelope caught his attention. He picked it up, opened it, and found a handwritten letter inside. Writing was shaky, as if written under extreme stress. There's a letter here, he announced, then began reading aloud. I no longer have the strength to carry. For him, everything around me is falling apart. All I have left is Max Andy. No, he'll do the right thing. I hope that one day someone will forgive me. His voice trailed off as the final words echoed. In the stillness, the letter wasn't signed. Butit's message was painfully clear, though Thor had reached a point of utter desperation in trusting their childhood's only companion. They had left their loyal dog. Max has been watching over his baby this whole time, one officer murmured, glancing at the German shepherd laying beside the crib. Max remained motionless, though his ears twitched slightly. Still alert to his surroundings, "Need to find the mother," Officer Daniels ordered firmly. "We have enough evidence to know that she's in serious trouble." The officers began canvassing the few neighbors who still lived in Theria. After some time they found an elderly man who remembered the previous occupant of the house. "I remember the young woman who lived here," the man said, leaning on his cane. "She was always with a large dog. That must be him." Reitha nodded toward Maxie. "Things she was going through a hard time. I saw her with a baby a few months back, but then she just disappeared." The story was becoming clearer. The woman had been overwhelmed by hardship and in a moment of despair placed her trust in Max. The dog Ho had protected her family too. The variant based on clues from the letter and the neighbor account the police widened their search. After several hours, they received a report about a young woman wandering in an exhausted state at a nearby park. When the team arrived, they found her sitting motionless on a bench, clutching herself tightly against Theckold. Her eyes were vacant, her face gaunt, and her hair unkempt. Officer Daniels approached cautiously, maintaining a serious but non-threatening tone. He chose his words carefully. "We found Ockeld, who was brought to the hospital. A dog led us to an abandoned house near Beto. You know anything about this? We wanted to ensure the child's safety." At the mention of the child, the woman's eyes widened in shock and hope. "Noah, is it my son? Is he alive?" she stammered, her voice trembling as tears streamed down her face. She brought her hands to her mother, body shaking with emotion. Daniels exchanged glances with his team. Recognizing that they had found the right person, he nodded gently. Andre assured her, "We found him. Noah is currently receiving treatment at the hospital. He's stable but still under observation." Rachel broke down in sobs after days of despair. She finally heard a glimmer of hope. Medical personnel quickly placed her on a stretcher to us her condition as they headed back to the hospital. Rachel began to tell her story. "Nola's father abandoned us right after he was born," she said, her voice hoarse with pain. "I tried to hold on, but everything fell apart. We ran out of food, out of money. I couldn't keep going." Rachel paused, her eyes distant as she lived the dark memories. "Max, he was always there for us. He never left my side or Noah's. When I was too weak to go on, I told Max. I asked him to take know somewhere." Safe silence filled the ambulance as the officers and medical staff absorbed the gravity of her words. The idea of a dog guiding a child to the hospital seemed impossible, yet Max hadn't exactly that. When the ambulance arrived at the hospital, Rachel was escorted to the pediatric care unit. Her heart pounded as she approached the door. Despite his exhaustion, Max stood and walked beside her, his gaze steady and vigilant. Inside the room, Rachel saw her son lying on a small bed surrounded by medical equipment. His breathing was steady and his skin no longer look at Lee. Pale tears filled her eyes as gently placed her hands on his tiny face. "Noah, my baby," she whispered, her voice cracking with emotion. Max stood silently at the doorway, watching over them with calm, observant eyes. Rachel turned to him, overwhelmed by gratitude. "I think you, Max. You saved my son. You saved me family," she said softly, her voice trembling with emotion. The doctors and officers stood quietly moved by the profound moment unfolding before them. Max was no ordinary dog. He was a protector, a silent hero who had fulfilled his mission with unwavering loyalty and love. Rachel was allowed to stay by Noah's side as doctors continue to monitor his condition. After several hours, Noah began to show clear signs of recovery, though still weak. He started to respond faintly to his mother's familiar voice. Rachel gently held his tiny hand, her eyes filled with love and hope. Max lay near the doorway, his body still wary but his ears alert. The doctors and nurses who had witnessed the entire story couldn't hide their admiration for the loyal dog. One nurse smiled and gently patted Max's head, whispering, "A real hero. Thanks to you, this little boy is alive." Max wagged his tail lightly as if he understood the heartfelt praise. Rachel looked at Max with deep gratitude. "You saved us, Maxiel. Never forget what you've done," she said softly. her voice trembling with emotion after a few days of treatment. Doctors confirmed that Noah was out of critical condition and steadily improving, thanks to the dedicated care of the medical staff. The boy was slowly regaining his strength. Meanwhile, social workers at the hospital stepped in to help Rachel secure temporary housing and access essential support. The day of Rachel's discharge arrived on a bright sunny morning. She held Noah in her arms. Her face showed both exhaustion and renewed hope as she stepped through the hospital doors. Sunlight bathed her son's face. Noah opened his eyes wide in curiosity, gazing at his mother before giving her a small, gentle smile, the first one she had seen in days. Max walked beside them, his posture steady but alert, as though he still had a duty to protect them. Rachel stopped, bent down to stroke Max's head and whispered, "We made it. Max, thanks to you, have a chance to start over new stuff." Their emotional story had spread throughout the local community. When Rachel arrived at her new home, strangers showed up with small gifts for no clothes, food, and toys. Some even offer a jeep. Opportunities to Rachel, eager to help her rebuild her life. The first few days in their new home were challenging, but with the support of kind neighbors and Max's unwavering loyalty, Rachel knew she no longer had to face everything alone. She watched as Noah crawled across floor, his bright, lively eyes full of wonder. "We made it through, Max," she said softly, stroking the dog's head. Max looked at her with his calm, wise eyes, as if to say he understood. Max's story was not just one of miraculous survival. It was a testament to love and loyalty that transcended all boundaries. Rachel no hand. Max's emotional journey has ended with a hopeful new beginning, but this story teaches us something even deeper. Power of loyalty, love, and sacrifice. It'll change a family's destiny forever. If you found this story inspiring, we'd love to hear your thoughts. Share your feelings in the comments below and tell us what you think about Max's incredible background and the family's journey to survival and hope. Hit the like button if you want to help spread this uplifting message to more people, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss more inspiring stories like this one. We are thrilled to have you as part of our growing community of people who cherish mindful stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.